Okay, so my name is Jared, and for my fellowship, I was working with an organization called Casa Verde in a rural community called Limon in Nicaragua. So before we get too far ahead, I think it'd be smart to just sort of get a background as to where I was working. So I was working in the communities mainly of Limon Uno y Dos in like the southwestern Pacific coast of Nicaragua. So the closest major city to us was an hour and a half bus ride away. It was called Rivas. The population is roughly 1,215. Like about 20% of the people living in this community have access to running water, and 80% of the people living in this community still cook their food and boil water with firewood. Generally, it's pretty hot, humid, and relatively dry and dusty all year. That's a pretty good picture of what it looks like for the most of the time. This is probably a good idea of what rush hour would look like. So my site host is a small organization called Casa Verde. They were formally founded in 2010 and are largely focused on providing opportunities to youth from all backgrounds with the experiences, the skills, and the resources they need to succeed as global citizens. So this involves both bringing groups of foreign volunteers to Nicaragua to work on community benefit projects while also leading their own local initiatives with the collaboration of the community, such as primarily the youth empowerment organization Formación Phoenix, which provides local kids with college scholarships, like occupational experiences, etc. They also have a homestay program which allows local families to host foreign students and gives them a stake in the benefits that the financial benefits that come through with that. And then a variety of community benefit projects, including a library. They've worked on a library. They're doing something on Christmas for 800 people, like a Christmas party for 800 people. There's a lot that they do. So my internship duties were focused around the goal of just assisting administratively Casa Verde with a variety of different tasks they were provided with. And then this was broken down smaller into 3 specific objectives, which were to work on creating the instructional handbook for them, which detailed their service, the way that they operate with service learning. Also, supervising teams of volunteers who came down to work, which were all foreign-born teams, which were called service learning teams and will probably be called service learning teams for the rest of the presentation. And also to organize a retreat for local kids to an island after they were finished with all of the collaboration that they were doing with the volunteer teams. So the service learning handbook ended up being about 30 pages and covered aspects of Casa Verde's service learning program, ranging from their advertisement for service learning programs to how they implement projects with service learning programs, the different types of service learning programs that they offer. Additionally, I was working on, like I said before, partially to help out with the handbook, was to just observe the service learning teams that came down and to sort of make sure that nobody got hurt and to sort of supervise them when they were going through their own activities. And then finally, I think that the most difficult responsibility that I had involved working with Formación Phoenix for their retreat, because I was involved with arranging the budget, the meals, and the housing for this, for a couple of days for this retreat. And that meant a lot of interacting with, various different, very informal kind of economic conversations about, what can you offer us, and working around a very small budget. So going off of that, what this experience has really taught me, and at least in a professional sense, is how to work with a limited amount of money. I didn't get provided very much to sort of have this retreat happen, for example, or for any of my other projects. And then additionally, to sort of plan an event or a similar type of project for a number of different people. And also, probably most importantly, how to react when life gets in the way of those plans and just kind of throws them into the trash. And that happened a lot. For example, I might be working on my laptop and it had a bad battery, and then the power would just go out. So I would have to, bike 3 or 4 kilometers to find somewhere with a generator so that I could keep working. That happened a few times. And then from a cultural sense, this was obviously pretty helpful for Spanish communication skills. There was not a lot of English spoken during my internship. And also there's a lot that I sort of picked up on different social mannerisms and cues that aren't found here, that are sort of, I can't really like explain all of them, but it's sort of, they have a different way of communicating, you know, especially like non-verbally, that we just generally don't, because we don't look at each other as much. Like, you know, these people could sit down on like, you know, a porch and just kind of look at each other and talk really slowly and just kind of pick everything up as they went from there. Like, it's kind of hard to explain. But then that was one of the things that I sort of started picking up on, and it sort of made me more familiar in like environments that I'm not necessarily, you know, culturally experienced in. So then as far as like an overall impact, that's kind of also hard to narrow down. And academically, it's given a human face to a lot of the concepts that we've discussed in class. For example, in that picture, that's of a baby in a hammock. And the hammock is in like a US military pattern from the 80s that, you know, it was just on the boat. The guy still had the hammock from whatever he was doing in the 80s. And so, I mean, this was from a particularly probably not safe place that I was traveling through. But I mean, you'd see people walking around with like, you know, 80s era military fatigues, or somebody with a huge scar on their face. And that sort of put into like human perspectives some of the effects of violence that aren't really discussed in classes at all. Like, you kind of get distance from it when you're sitting in the ivory tower trying to like look at figures from these things. Additionally, it's given me a comprehensive glance at how an NGO operates, especially with a limited amount of money, like surrounding, you know, fundraising, good management of stuff, like heavy use of like, you know, personal negotiation with different businesses about how to make something work out. Because there was never really a price range for what we were doing with people. You know, it'd be like, I need to use your van to get people over here, you know, and then we'd go from there as to like talking about how much that was going to cost, just because there's not a lot of like formal economic institutions that you could go to make that stuff work. So then on a more like personal impact, this has helped me to live more, learn to live more intentionally, not only in like a professional sense, but also in just a personal sense, like working towards something. Whereas it's hard to explain. A lot of the people that I was working with were very driven, you know, to benefit either their families or to, you know, make a difference in the world. And that's sort of, I mean, as opposed to here where a lot of people I think are kind of mixed up about what they want to do with their lives, everybody there knew, like 100%. And they spent 100% of that energy every single day working towards that goal, which was really cool for me to see. And then it also showed me the importance of like a family, in a sense. There was a lot of, you know, one of the main things that kept people getting up in the morning at like 5 o'clock to go work for, you know, the entire day was to help their family. And, you know, like also I had to live with a host family, which was a really crazy experience. And I don't know, it's crazy. Like, and it's also broadened my perspectives as to sort of how, I guess, subjective our own interpretations of the world are, and how many different, you know, interpretations of stuff there are, like of events, of, you know, life, and I mean not of life itself, but like of, you know, the interactions that we have with our environment every single day are, you know, we think that they're sort of the same way, like all the same way everywhere, but these, like, they interpret everything so differently from us, and it's really hard to understand unless like you actually have been living with, you know, in a different cultural atmosphere for an extended period of time. So with that, I would like to thank my site supervisors who aren't here, Lidiet Alvarez, Ami Riley, and Jen Brummett, my academic sponsor, Parna Thomas, my host family, Herbie, Kati, Luis, Wilber, Ariel, Karina, Adrian, y Yera, members of Phoenix, and the Guzman family. And that's it.